You're sitting around a campfire, swapping stories of the spoils of the day's hunt, when one of your companions gets up and walks a few paces into the darkness. Quiet blankets the camp as you watch them move their body deliberately and gracefully, a look of pure focus on their face. Moments later, you realise it's strange you can actually see their face at all. Considering the shroud of darkness at the edge of the campfire's light, you see their face because their hands are aglow with a soft, bright, ethereal light. You check for a candle, a sprig of glowing moss, a paste, paint, or a moonbeam. But it is none of them. You have witnessed magic for the first time, and you now live in a very different world. Magic, definitionally, is a power which goes against the natural order of things. It allows beings to influence the world and things around them in a way that cannot be explained using any known natural system. Therefore, the use of magic is a supernatural phenomenon, which defies any reasonable explanation except this power is something beyond the natural order. Whether it's due to special blood, unlocking full human potential through deep meditation, the blessing of a deity, or the activation of an ancient reality warping machine left under the earth by ancient aliens who require a specific hand coordination code to activate them. The first time magic is used in a world, it is a miracle. It is supernatural, and it cannot be correctly explained. Heck, even if the user of magic correctly identifies the source of their power, say lucid visualization and unparalleled focus, they may be able to convince the people around them that their power is aspirational, but it will still also be viewed as exemplary, essentially as special. And once we start categorizing people who can perform supernatural feats as special, then we start creating idols, gurus, saints, and living deities. Remember, it's exactly through a combination of giving really good advice and demonstrating supernatural ability that figures like Buddha and Jesus are able to gather followings in their time, followings which, it turns out, have endured for many, many years to come. Largely, these followings turn multi-generational because those first followers or early followers use oral and written traditions to record their feats and teachings. So many new religious movements in our world start with a charismatic guy with a message that sounds good and some followers. Now add magic into the mix, demonstrable, clear, miraculous magic, bona fide, supernatural, controllable occurrences, and you've got a recipe for some very long-lasting religions. And this is without even noting that magic itself, as a human concept, often comes in the mold of religion. Shamans and magic practitioners are often part of established religious orders and often are expected to be able to achieve things that the ordinary man cannot. You could even call the process of transubstantiation a form of magic, although Catholics would argue that that comes through the Holy Spirit, not in any way done by the priest themselves as a mage. But surely this only works as an explanation for why magic and religion must be entwined if magic is new, untested, and undiscovered, right? Once you've got textbooks and magic schools, the mysticism's going to wear off, and magic may become something more like electrical engineering, a dangerous trade practiced by a small section of the population who make the world run for everyone else. At worst, mages may even become hermit-like academics, endlessly studying magical semantics from their conjured giant towers. None of this really screams cultic leader. So in a world where the principles of magic have been discovered and tested through as a scientific phenomenon. I'm not here talking about rigorous scientific testing. I'm talking just a kind of trial and error to get a broad sense of the true way of doing things. You would think that there's no room for a faith-based understanding of the magical arts. But I think that is wrong. Let's look at the development of knowledge in history as an example. It might seem bold, but I would argue that up until the Enlightenment, really, every single scientific or technological discovery in the world occurred within a religious system of thought. Everything from advancement in architecture and engineering to Newton's experiments with optics to 12th century advancements in water mill technologies. They all exist in a context where the world was presumed to be naturally inspired by divinity, where geometry, natural laws, and even colours were presumed to be hand-picked features of existence by God. And that's just in Europe. Further afield, Confucian and Taoist philosophies shape education, aesthetics, and even social organisation. And in Aboriginal Australians and Native Americans, we see nomadic cultural organisation, farming practices, and even hunting all being modified in behaviours by an animism which values the connected natural world around them. Heck, even that poster child of religion versus science debates, Galileo's support of heliocentrism. Now, that was not a debate on whether or not the Bible was worth listening to, but whether the Bible contained all of God's truth, or whether the natural world was itself a repository for divine revelation, seeing as the natural world was created by God. My point is, when a religious worldview is dominant or even ubiquitous in a society, new developments get interpreted in that mode. We really seem to have forgotten this phenomenon in our modern world, but it is a really potent effect. Think about your own dominant biases in your worldview. New information gets filtered through your assumptions, and it's an unavoidable part of making meaning as a human. So natural beauty and the force of water echo God's perfection and power. Architectural features such as arches and triangles are the strongest shapes for use in building, partly because of the mechanical realities of these things, but also because these must be the shapes that please God. And magic works the way it does because the gods will it to. Let's say, for example, a mage painstakingly develops a new technique that allows the fire that he summons to be harmless specifically to living creatures. This is, of course, a massive achievement with huge implications for a society, not just in saving lives, but also in myriad industrial applications. Now, I'm not going to make this easy and say that this mage had a bunch of disciples form a mystery cult of the sacred flame and just pass out the knowledge of his magical discovery as a mystery, a magical mystery of their particular religious movement, creating a kind of secret society of faithful people learning the same technique. All the while their followers are going out and evangelizing and using public demonstrations of this new sacred flame that can heat up and burn anything, but also can have a child's hand placed in it as an evangelizing tool to bring more people into the group. We're not going to go with that easy path. We're going to assume that there are a bunch of dominant faiths already in place and that the general public or populace has no need for a new saintly figure right now. Perhaps there's too many magical innovations happening right now for this to be particularly special or notable for most average people. In this case, then, our magical safety flame inventor will not be venerated personally, but will need to fit in a pre-existing mould or worldview for his invention to be popularised. First, he would likely look to any guild or academic organisation that he is involved with or a member of, as his research and his new discovery is likely going to align in some way with their values, or have been developed following their principles. If that's the case, then patrons, the historic legendary founder of the organisation or movement, or the funding temple or government will tend to do the PR for him. Much like an innovation which comes from the Platonic school of thought or the Jesuit monastic system. By having this kind of organisational PR, this build-up of works that have been achieved under this specific religious or philosophical or scientific system, you build up a corpus of work that one can be respected for. A corpus of work which you hope is going to allow people to invest their belief and faith in your philosophy or your ideology. But what if this mage is unaffiliated or is working in the shadows, outside the structures of any formal authority? Well, throughout history, religious organisations have been very quick to claim or adopt new technologies, not only as practical, sensible advancements, but in a spiritual sense as well. British railway and steam train innovation was critiqued by much of the established church authority in the 19th century. But these innovations were also championed by some religious figures as a divinely inspired innovation. Sermons were preached which used railway tracks and switching lines as metaphors for paths to heaven and hell. And some evangelical priests celebrated the railways and railway lines very much indeed, both practically and spiritually, with rail networks allowing them to meet the people where they are. Spiritually, due to actually having a captive audience in a carriage, and literally due to faster and more viable transit lines, which allow them to get to multiple different congregations within, say, a day. Setting aside for the moment that in our innovation of the safety flame will come from a place with some geographic cultural identity, and from an individual with a cultural, national and racial identity, any of which can be claimed or ignored by self-interesting parties as conforming to their ideals. All sorts of cultures and faiths will make practical and religious decisions as to whether they can conscience adopting this new technology justifiably within their worldviews. So sure, if the dominant philosophy is religious, magic and its use form part of that religious system, either seen as gifts from God, signs of prophets, gurus and saints, or even as inspired by divine influence. It just makes sense that magic gets associated with power, blessings and miracles, and that it becomes entwined with notions of religious authority and holiness. But let's test this notion to its extremes. A world where people have explored the cosmos, discovered fundamental universal truths and amassed such power that the gods man has dreamed up proved inadequate and shallow. A setting where, objectively, faith in traditional higher powers will not help you. First, we could take the easy path and say that when mages have supreme power, they may well become centerpieces of cultic behaviour, whether they like it or not. As sycophants and self-interested hangers-on begin to venerate and supplicate at their feet. Essentially, what we're doing here is just supplanting religious mysticism with actual bootlicking worship of living gods. That does happen when people are just demonstrably more powerful than others. Okay, so we'll assume that all of our special mages took a vow to avoid any sort of building of a cult of personality or anything like that. And they're so serious about this that they actively discourage such groups' formations and spread the fact of an absence of a specific deity or deific figure everywhere. Now, I may be biased here, but having studied religions and society for quite some time, I believe that faith and the organisation of said faith into systems of meaning is one of the most normal, expectable behaviours among social people. I don't have any faith myself, but my worldview relies on multiple non-empirical assumptions about the world and my place in it. That my opinions are well-founded and intelligent. That my way of life is understandable and morally viable. And that aiming to be a good person will help me through life. All of these things rely on my subjective experience and judgment of my internal world, and they are things that I cannot gather concrete data on. Even my general optimism regarding existence cannot be measurably, objectively assessed. Humans, at the very least, are not creatures that operate purely on objective or empirical data. We are messy, chaotic bags of hormones and squishy stuff who are so atrocious at intuitively comprehending probability that almost every human civilization in our history has had a problem with gambling. We just keep falling for fallacies. So sure, you give me a world where gods clearly don't exist. A world where the mechanics of magic are clearly explicable and predictable. A world where whether you can exert supernatural influence or not is determined by your genetic makeup. Where entire worlds are explored, catalogued, and then mined for resources. And their traditions and their deities prove useless under the boot of technological and magical prowess. Such a world will have religion. Not just the holdouts sticking to the old ways, which seem to have failed in the hope that actually their hardship is just a temporary test from their god and all will be reversed in time. But there will also be those who invest their faith and hope in fundamental universal forces. Good, evil, hope, and balance. Religion is such a broad spectrum. It's not just jackal-headed gods and afterlives. Deistic faiths barely believe in a god at all, just a broad ordering of existence. Animists posit a web of connections, which it is hard to deny if you study ecology in any detail. And some New Way faiths put their stock in anything from fostering human thriving and connection to the arrangement of the stars or crystals. Wait, hang on. Crystals. Magic powers. A religious spectrum all the way from traditional gods all the way to a broad sense that there is a universal force of balance which will eventually result in the vanquishing of the tyrants? Controversial scientific explanation for who gets magic that somehow also ties back to those universal forces of balance. Yeah, this is Star Wars. Religion is not some backwards system of hopes and prayers that allow people to delude themselves from the physical reality of life. Religion is a very human response to the world. Not just seeking explanations for supernatural phenomena, not just to explain the inexplicable, but to provide a grounding worldview, a narrative against which the world can be judged and experienced. We all have a worldview and we all exercise our worldviews every single day. Because the fact of the matter is, it is impossible for any individual to act in a fashion informed by the best understandings of all academic and empirical evidence at all times. We just can't know all of that and act on all of that. All those mental shortcuts we take. It's okay if I forgot my umbrella. It'd fall apart in this wind anyway. The weather's not that bad. The news said it'd clear up later. Wet hair's going to humanise me in this meeting. Well, I'd be late if I went back to get it. Or I'm sure it'll work out fine. All of these are small acts of faith that we employ every single day that are part of a system of private and public beliefs that we share. You just try and remove the mental shortcuts, the little bits of safety, the small superstitions from human behaviour, and you remove what makes us people. We are not logical, we are not perfect, and we all have biases. And in a world where some people can do magic, you'd be a fool not to incorporate magical thinking into your worldview. Perhaps someone will stop this rain with magic. Perhaps it's caused by magic. Maybe it's a curse targeting just me. Perhaps it's fate that caused this rain. Or maybe an omen of a god's wrath. Or maybe it's just my luck that I wasn't born with the power to stop this from raining on me. What I'd give to be that special, favoured, or blessed. Just a few more potential feelings that forgetting your umbrella in such a world can engender. So there we are. I hope I've been able to convince you that magic should never be sterile or separate from the worldviews, faiths, expectations and beliefs of people, even if it's illogical. Honestly, no human endeavour should be kept separate from notions of belief and faith. We're humans. We make narratives, we tell stories, we make connections, and we make meaning. It is just who we are. Not every wizard is going to believe in a god. Some may even aspire to some sort of Vulcan logicality that is unimpeachably empirical. And that too is its own aspirational worldview. It may not be a religious one, but it relies on a sense of personal exceptionalism, of breaking free from the mould of normalcy and becoming something more. It may not be religious, but it relies on many of the same conscious and unconscious biases that just exist as humans, a sense of specialness. And for every atheistic wizard sitting in their tower, figuring out the exact rules in a scientific fashion, there will be dozens of people who view that very act as one of divine practice. You can bet that someone around the world will view magic, or mages, or gods, as saints, blessed, lucky, or as the fated solution to their personal or systemic problems. And at the end of the day, those are the ingredients of faith. But with all that said, I've been Tom, otherwise known as the Grungeonmaster. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.